Folks, welcome to this talk. I think it's exciting to have all of you. Namaskar to all of you. Let me start by talking to Shamika. Shamika, during the COVID times, there were many challenges on this country, and especially in governance, and people criticized the government for not, doing things on time, blah, blah, blah. But you are the one person who was looking at data for India and globally. And based upon your data analysis and what you've done, how do you rate India's performance? Do you think the government's focus on data, government's focus on strategy for COVID really worked based on the analysis that you have done? Do you think they did things right?
Oh, Mohan, thank you. Given our given that preemptively, I think very pragmatically, knowing that our health infrastructure would never be able to accommodate a deluge of kind, I think the early steps really helped in containing the spread. As a result of which, of course, we do note that is also like talking about the entire continent of Europe. So now, while Western Europe has really done well, Eastern Europe is really in flames in some sense. So in the Indian context, means overall we've had huge
Shamika, 1 minute. Will others please go on mute so that there's no echo? Please go on mute. Only Shamika will speak.
Yeah. So given what a large country we are, the national level strategy in the beginning, Mohan, I think were very, very preemptive and much needed. We got a lot of beating in the beginning, being told what a stringent lockdown and how India had essentially throttled its economy and so on. But you have to view this as the opportunity cost of life. And given how our public health infrastructure in many parts of the country, I think it was the right decision at the time. Subsequently, the way testing was ramped up. Now, you have to remember that you are making up for decades of lack of creating this infrastructure. And within, I think, 6 months, every state had ICMR approved testing labs with required supply chain where they were all linked with Delhi. So the data, while we can talk about how much more we could have done at patient level, because we are constantly comparing ourselves with Germany, OECD, etc., I would say you have to be realistic in terms of what our infrastructure was. And based on that, I would rate India very high. Now, again, remember, even at our height, or you can say the peak, some states were clearly way behind the curve. Major state like Maharashtra, if it is testing with a test positivity rate of 20%, meaning of every 120 are coming positive, when the required benchmark is 5%, that also leaves a lot to want, because eventually health is a state subject. So it also made us acutely aware that in a federal structure like ours, states also have to play along. So, you have to just take an overall flavor of this huge country with a lot of state level, variations. But on the whole, we have done very well. Of course, remember, our numbers have again started to go up. 9 states are showing increase, but hopefully it will not be the kind of second wave that Europe and America, etc., have had.
Shamika, let me take this question forward again. If you are the health minister of this country, based on all the data that you have analyzed, based on what you are seeing right from the time, because I remember, you were the one person was really, really getting into details. How would you use all this data, this study, to evolve a health policy for this country? Because we're talking about new age governance. It implies that new age governance is based on data, is based on reality, is based on up-to-date information. And you have got all of this. You're seeing the weaknesses and strength of the federal structure. You've seen some states do well, some states not do well. If you're the health minister, you had a carte blanche to rewrite the policy for the country. What are the things you would address?
So first, Mohan, I think our biggest gap remains data. Remember, we are still analyzing Johns Hopkins data, right? Our testing data is coming from Apex Institution, ICMR, but a lot of the aggregation is being done by volunteers. And that is the beauty of this country, that I think in many ways, people, ordinary researchers across the country have helped aggregate this data and put it across. And of course, institutions have cleaned it and made it available for people like us to then use. So number one, I would seriously make investment in data. And I think this is where if I were to say one big idea, Mohan, this is the time we have to invest in a civil registration of vital statistics, meaning we need a CRVS system in this country. It takes us 10 years to finally recognize or understand, because across census, we don't know how urban we are. So we are always using proxy metrics, night lights data, density data, because I do that for a living. And I think proxies are good, but it's not the actual measure. So that's number one. We need real-time census linked to metrics like Aadhaar, where we know that what is the demographic transition. So that a lot of the conversation which is happening in a vacuum today, Hindu population growth, Muslim population growth, how many states over the last 25 years have become Muslim, Christian majority states, for instance. It affects the nature of, not just politics, but larger public policy discussions, which right now are full of conjectures, because 12, 13 years of not having updated census data, and health is a very large part of it, but there are many other aspects as well. In a young, dynamic country like India, 10, 12 years is a very long period of time. So I would seriously invest in a major CRVS overhaul and link it to something like Aadhaar so that real-time information is available. And the second, which I think people discount, is communication more. We have to communicate with the citizens better. If you have, and I think that was frankly the professional call that some of us took, because we were all scared. We were all worried that what is this, the way it was expanding in Europe and Japan and all, we were thinking this deluge will never survive. Schools were shutting down. People were scared. We were getting calls from cancer patients saying, will we ever get chemo, etc., because hospitals are shutting down. Under that kind of a fear and uncertainty, I think the biggest investment is communication. Talk to people. Tell them exactly, look, projections, models, many were wrong. But real time, what we were looking at is the past 7 days data and saying, this is the way we are moving. And I think that allayed fears. The sense that we were growing, but we were growing at a rate where we could manage. Some cities were hotspot occasionally, but then certain other cities were only growing. Some were getting better at the same time. So I think that overall information helps. Some people think financing is our biggest constraint in healthcare. You will hear this all the time, that India spends very little on health. Now, it is true that we spend less on health. But you will be surprised how many states in India are sitting with unspent budget in healthcare, which means it is not a simple fix like allocation of money. It is also a government capacity issue. Because in a lot of our states, the chief medical officer, who is, by the way, supposed to be as powerful as the DM or the superintendent of police, the chief medical officer is really much lower in the hierarchy of power and resources. Now, you have to correct for a lot of those distortions. Money is not our biggest concern right now. So I think I would use this pandemic, Mohan, to really make healthcare the center focus, the cornerstone of Indian economy. Also from a strategic perspective, remember the world is aging. Everybody is looking for ways to reduce health costs. And they're all looking at, countries like India, young country. So we have people, nurses, doctors. We also have health IT support. So of course, the vaccination, pharmaceutical, generics, that story. So India is poised to make healthcare the engine of growth for the next 50 years for the global economy. And I think that has to be the longer term agenda for health, not just taking care of our own needs, but also as a growth engine.
Shamika, a very, very quick answer now. Did policymakers use all your data analytics, talk to you about what is happening to get deep insights into what to do?
Yes, they did, Mohan. I must confess. People were getting the same information that our senior most policymakers were getting, at least from my table. But I must tell you that there was a lot more information available. We could have done better communication.
Okay. That's great. That's great. I think, you're giving us great hope that, things could work with civil society coming together. Now, Monica, very interesting questions come up in your area of your expertise, financial services, the financial sector. Do you think our policymakers are using latest data Do they have latest data? I'll give you one small instance. Our CPI data is based upon 2011-12 weights, where food is 46%. GDP has gone up maybe twice from that time. Per capita income has gone up nearly twice. But do you think our policymakers, while making policy in this area, in the finance area, are using up-to-date data?
And that, Mohan, is one of the key issues of one is the use of data, and the second is the DNA of data, which is what I actually want to begin with to say that yes, data is very important, but there is also a DNA of data. And I will just take a small example. And this has been a bugbear with me, it's been a controversial story, which is to say that India imports a lot of gold because Indian households, because of the entire financial sector mistrust issues, invest in gold traditionally because the financial sector was not evolved. We account for gold on the current account, and we have a current account deficit, which has been a bugbear with us for a long time. But we tax gold globally as a capital asset. So we pay a capital gains tax on it domestically. Even the Basel III norms have a markdown, but it is still a capital asset. So it isn't. So when if every time I have asked why is gold on my current account on my balance sheet of the country, I'm told these are global norms. Now, who makes the global norms? Obviously, it is not us. So yes, data is very important, but if we are looking at a major thought of a national data initiative, we should remember to embed it with the Indian story, with the Indian narrative very strongly. And that will then feed into the collection of data and, of course, the dissemination. So that becomes really key. And, you know, there was one big thought in terms of how data should actually inform policy. And what I have seen over the years is that there is a certain attempt by the bureaucrats to imagine that they know what is good for markets. And since my work has been with financial markets, with regulators, with the government, I have seen upfront, and I'll give you one example. 2012, there was a scheme called Rajiv Gandhi Equity Savings Scheme, which is a stock market scheme designed by a bureaucrat. Who obviously these people sit on defined benefit pensions. They have no idea of how either stock markets work or how individual investors think. The scheme, of course, was a non-starter. The only reason it came into the budget was because of the name of the scheme, which is Rajiv Gandhi. Right? 2018, there were no subscribers and the scheme was let go. So, should there have been a data-based understanding of what really works, and why is it that a gold investor will not go to a stock market, not because you're going to give him a harebrained scheme, but because of a whole variety of access trust issues? So had data been used in this construction, we may have led to a very different space. So absolutely, data has to inform policy.
Monica, this leads to another point which I think you can elucidate to us, and that is we are seeing an explosion of data coming in the financial sector. There are many startup fintech companies. UPI is there. UPI released the data, etc. There's a lot of information about tax collection, tax estimate. A lot of economists are writing articles about GDP growth, blah blah blah. So much is happening everywhere. Now tell me, in the budget making or in policy, national policy, GDP, national policy for growth, do you think government is using enough data, up-to-date data, to ensure that the policy is based upon what is required at this point of time? You give an example about a scheme, but on a broad level for economic growth, with all this new data over the last 2 years, please remember, I'm only talking about the last 2 years. Do you think a renewed move to collect all the data and use it? Do you think analysts are writing about it? Do you think financial journalists are writing about it? Do you think there is a new move to do all this?
Right. So one is that now there is access to big data, And I would imagine that even the government is scrambling to understand how to use this big data. It's a new animal. For example, when the demonetization happened, we all had thought that that would lead to uh, people with cash either having to destroy it, but we found it all got channeled to the banking sector. And then we can ask, why is it that those who managed to convert black into white through banking are not being targeted and sent notices? There's a capacity constraint within the government also to understand how to join all the dots that this data exhausts. We're all throwing off giant exhausts of data, and parts of the system are beginning to use this data. But I think when the government begins to use this data, there are immediately issues of privacy and how far you can go. And of course, the privacy of data is a very important thing. However, I think it is still early days where the government is not fully equipped to actually use the data to bring out the full story of what is really going on. The data is available, it is a capacity, and I am not saying that the capacity is not being enhanced or that there is no view to this being enhanced. It is only a matter of time that the entire narrative, the digital exhaust that we throw out, and again, I will give you an example out of a regulator that I have worked with closely, which is SEBI. I've been part of their committee for 10 years. There is a move to use social media footprints to track insider trading, and insider trading remains one of the most difficult things to catch because of a variety of issues. I don't want to go into that, but they are actually looking at the social media footprints to establish relationships between two possibly unrelated parties. So there are parts of the system in which data is being harnessed, used. There is still some time in connecting the dots, but when we are able to do it, we are looking at, I'm hoping that the privacy law is in place by the time, and all the global majors have to agree with those privacy norms because we're in India. Then we're looking at a very, very different story about the Indian economy, because uh, it is not being captured fully. What is happening on the ground is not being captured fully today with the kind of data mindset that we still have. And I said it is the DNA of data which will have to change.
Monica, one very quick question. We see on social media people like Kaushik Basu, I want to give names, the former chief economic advisor, Raghuram Rajan, talking about the global economy and some aspects. For example, trust in FDI. If you have this kind of politics in India, you will not get FDI, but we're having an explosion of FDI. Now tell me, people who make investment decisions, what kind of data do they have? Enough data to make investment decisions versus for India when they come to India versus some of these old style economies, not like Shamika, who works with data and she knows how to get the data. Some of these old style economies who have made a living and grown up using narratives.
I think in the previous panel, there was a comment which said that the G2G and the G2C conversations are happening irrespective of narratives. And I think it's a really powerful point that, and your comment proves your point, that look at the stock markets, look at where they're going, and look at the FDI into India. The only thing stopping FDI is not the narrative about India. It is about our bureaucracy. It's about the difficulty of doing business in India. Money doesn't care about the narrative which is constructed. A lot of the lies are caught. A lot of the political posturings are caught. And frankly, understanding money very deeply, it's looking for a return. And if in a largest democracy with institutions which work, the money will be more than happy to come and is going to completely ignore the narrative. We just have to clean our house and welcome the Lakshmi home.
Well, that's interesting. Shamika, before I go to Shashank has been waiting for some time. Money does not care about lies. Money cares about data and returns. Now, Shamika, what is the role of economists in understanding money and understanding economy do you think economists now, with the explosion of data, should reorient their work not on narratives but on data-based narratives?
100%, Mohan. I mean, look, there is data. Data is like oil, and you've heard this cliche everywhere.
Yeah.
But to transform oil or data into information or something useful requires data analytics, requires the data scientists. And I think that is one investment which we are yet to make. I think the private sector is doing phenomenal work in R&D. But I think from the government side, there is a sense of lethargy. There is the old way of doing business. Research, unfortunately, doesn't adhere to a lot of the old feudal structure or the hierarchy. So I think that investment needs to be made, and narrative comes out of that. In fact, if any of you have followed my Twitter account, the only reason I got on Twitter, Mohan, and remember it, I still tweet relatively less, but I put data out. I think the best way to build a narrative, or frankly break a narrative, because some narratives are absolutely vicious and sometimes they're totally hollow, is to put out a statistics. Now, with, of course, all the caveats, etc. And I think that speaks 1,000 words, rather than we having to just say things repeatedly. No, data is a source of immense power, Mohan. We just have to know how to use it appropriately. But I want to make a small point. Is the government using enough? Now, think of something like National Health Mission. We have had it for 15 years now. We have just extended it again. Ideally, we should do an impact assessment. We should know exactly what aspect of it is working and what is not working. So day-to-day governance requires us to have this kind of an updated knowledge on huge schemes, how to change them, how to make them more efficient, effective. And I think that we still have some way to go.
Thank you. And Shashank, you are the data generation. You are the cutting edge. You are the person who understands data well, because I think you've grown up on data, use data in the day-to-day work. Now, you have been one of the founders of Data Reveal, and have been trying to use data to fight the kind of narrative that many people are trying to get to talk about India. Can you tell us how this has worked, and what are the things that you should do to put data first, so that we can talk about India based on data?
Sure, Mohan sir. Thank you so much. And while I was waiting, I was actually enjoying my wait as I was listening to Shamika ji and Monica ji. And to your questions, as Mohan ji, as we were doing analysis and we're trying to put data together and analytics together, the struggle has been finding data. And while that is true, I think it would have been a harder challenge 10 years back compared to now. We now have the Indian data statistics site live since 2012. There is a global index, which is Global Open Data Index, which rates how well countries share data. And it's heartening to know that India is currently ranked 32 out of the 94 countries that are ranked, which is in the top, puts us top 1/3. Amazing. Having said that, we found a lot of data. We're able to put some analytics together, but still some key data that's missing. Amongst the data that's available, and I'd like to call this out, one of the key pieces of information which I think is missing is about land ownership. An interesting piece of data again is that 66% of our civil cases today are related to land ownership.
Oh.
What would happen if this data is made available to public? What if this data is made available for people, not just for analytics, and I'm talking about governance, I'm talking about how our day-to-day living gets impacted. Even ease of business gets impacted if the data of land ownership is made available. The number of cases would come down drastically. There'd be a huge increase in the ease of using business. The stress on the judiciary system would come down. And we all know today that if in an economy, if in a democracy, if we need the agencies, the government agencies to work well, we need the judiciary to support. And putting data together is going to support the whole ecosystem as a whole. So we've seen this case. We've seen about Smriti Irani ji during her address talk about how pushing for data has made them realize that the number of children who need nutrition is not 8 million as initially estimated, but actually 1 million. Imagine using data. Yes, sir. And using data, if if it's helped ensure that the right level of nutrition is going to the right level of right children, that's the best that can happen. Another small anecdote that I can give is that there is an OOS ratio, which is the out of school ratio. There's a case where India was featuring on fairly quite poor when it came to the number of the girl children who were passing out of senior education. Monica ji, Shamika ji, this may be of interest to you, being women yourselves, that India was doing bad. A lot of girl children were not attending schools and not graduating from senior school and tertiary education was becoming an issue. Data was sitting there. A little bit of analysis was required to be done, was done. And guess what the revelation was? The schools where toilets were not present for girls, the dropout rate was 3x than in schools where there were facilities for children of that age, girl children of that age. I mean, if I read it, I feel so terrible that our own children, girl children, are having tough time. But looking at data, we've been able to fix the education system. Looking at data, we've been able to ensure that we get nutrition to the right people. Continue to look at data, continue to keep data available for people, help us in judiciary. I can see data being made regularly available and used only benefiting the country. More data-backed solutions, make data-backed suggestions would be made, and that's going to be fascinating. And I'm so excited with the ideas that Shamika ji gave about real-time digital census. I cannot say if I've heard something more important and relevant at this point in time.
Shashank, another question that comes up very well. What is the role of people like Shamika, Monica, you, and Anurag, and everybody else in an environment where there's a lot of narrative and government is desperate looking for data? And like Monica and Shamika both said, government, there is a DNA challenge, and there's a lack of understanding about where to get data, what to do with data. So what should people like us do to make sure that government takes policy decisions based on data, and the narratives that we hear in media is also based on data?
Great question, Mohanji. I would say a couple of things. One is the questions that people ask back to the government, if they are data backed, then the answers cannot not include data in them. So empowering people. Democracy is all about getting people the ability to ask the right question. The government servants, the public servants are answerable to people. And if the question includes data, the answers will include data. The role that all of us can do, if I could just expand on that, I also would like to say that we generally have a spectrum. We have people right from people who don't understand that their narratives being played. There are people who understand narratives are being played but don't know what to do. There are people who understand that narratives are being played, data is available, and data is the right way to respond. I think we have to educate and support people in the whole spectrum. Data Reveals is a public utility platform which hopefully addresses number 3, but all of us together, including other influencers, need to let people understand that narratives are being played, and we need to respond. And that is something that all of us can do and something that we should continue to do.
Okay, folks, we have to come to the end of this discussion, but one closing comment. Shamika, Monica, then Shashank, your closing comments on new age governance and data. What should the way forward?
Well, we can't wait for bureaucracy to develop and evolve and demand such services, Mohan. So I will go back to one of the old fundamental laws of economics. I mean, we say this is the Say's law. Supply will create its own demand. We just have to continue doing good, high quality data analysis and publishing. And I think eventually bureaucracy is one part of the larger public that uses it, but I think it's good for the nation as a whole.
Monica?
Big data is going to be extremely empowering both to the governed and to the governor. So for the government and the citizen, both. It will be hugely empowering. My only prayer is we should get the DNA of our own data exhausts right.
Shashank?
Mohanji, my concluding thought would be, in addition to all the thoughts we've said, is the talent exists in India. The technology is ready today to be able to support blockchains. And the amount of engineers we have in India data scientists that we have in India is amazing. It's high time that we tap into the potential and the talent available. We are solving problems for a lot of other countries. We can do it for us as well. We should do it, and we should tap into this. With that, I can only see a very bright future for us, and I'm very excited about what is in store for us.
Folks, I want to bring this to an end. There's an extraordinary conversation between three very brilliant people who have worked with data and who have shown policymakers what to do. Professor Shamika Ravi has, been truly extraordinary in the COVID times, of course, all the time. But what she has written has given great hope for the people of this country, and her impact has been tremendous, and I think is extraordinary. Monica has been working on the financial sector, and her talk and her points about the use of data in policy and how it is happening is very, very heartening. And of course, Shashank is the digital generation working in the digital companies, and I think his views and how optimistic he is and what could happen with the proper use of data. And I think I'll just end by saying all of us jointly must start producing case studies which show how data and the use of data can make better policy, so that we can send it to our policymakers, our political leaders, so that they also understand that we need up-to-date data so that India can be better. So thank you very much for this conversation. I want to thank all the three extraordinary people for their point. Thank you very much. Over to the organizers.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know about you all, but my mind is buzzing. I especially like the new pieces of information that I didn't know about. Do tweet and post and tell us which facts and number were surprises for you. Do not forget to tag Mohanji, Shamikaji, Monikaji, and Shashankji. And remember, hashtag Tathya 2021.